welcome to Leaders Unplugged with UJ, a podcast where we have real unscripted conversations with extraordinary leaders shaping the future of work. I'm your host, Ujjwal, and today we are diving into a topic that is on every leader's mind, whether they speak it out loud or not. AI fear is real. The anxiety in the workplace is real. The pressure of transformation on leaders, and that too fast, is real. And the risk of leaving people behind in that transformation, very real. So, how do you lead AI transformation in sync with people enablement in a way that you bring your people along with you and not ahead of them? There is no one better to explore this with than my guest today, Stephanie Nash, Vice President, Human Resources for Asia Pacific at Ingram Micro, which is a global technology and supply chain giant operating in over 60 countries. She has also held various leadership positions at Microsoft, BHP, Allergen, and Alibaba Group, which was Redmart earlier. So Stephanie is a leader who has been sitting at the very intersection of people and transformation. So she has seen firsthand what happens when organizations rush into change without bringing their people along, and also what it looks like when they get it right. Stephanie, it's an absolute privilege to welcome you to L&D Unboxed. Pleasure to have you.
Thank you so much, Ujjwal. Really looking forward to today's conversation.
Awesome. So let's dive right into it. So if we
Sounds great.
remove the word job loss from the conversation, Stephanie, what, according to you, are the three hidden fears that AI is triggering at work? And how do you spot them early to not before they become silent resistance?
Yeah, I think it's a great question and a very relevant one. I think that there is constant talk and speculation in industry, publications, in the media, in organizations about the introduction of AI and the potential implications to job loss, and that creates high levels of anxiety and fear for people, which is very real. But I think that there are actually three areas that sit underneath and underpin that sense of fear that people are feeling and may result and show up in actual resistance to change or perceived resistance to change. And what those three things are really around relevance, agency, and trust. And what is meant by relevance is, I think, that particularly in senior leadership roles, but across the organization, people have found their sense of worth, their sense of purpose, their sense of identity through the professional expertise, the strategic thinking, the decision making, the ability to impact and influence the organization based on how they've grown up over the time of their life and their career. And with the introduction of AI and related technologies, the question of is everything I've built about myself still relevant today? And will it be relevant in the future? And therefore, will I be relevant in the future? And that also impacting relevance, but also agency. If we have spent our career aspiring and reaching a point of the ability to influence an organization at senior levels, or to have high levels of decision making discretion and the ability to impact and navigate an organization significantly and deeply, is the technology going to become better, faster, and smarter than I am? And therefore, what will that mean for me in the future? And I think that also impacts the third area that sits behind that resistance to change or perceived resistance to change, which is trust. Do people trust that they will still be relevant and they will still have the impact, and that the organization will be committed to doing the right things or the best things to ensure that I remain relevant and I am still valued and needed within the organization? Or am I fearful that the introduction of the technology is there to replace me? and to replace my thinking and to replace my expertise and to replace my job.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
And so,
and
sorry, I was going to say also, I think that that's also where then we may see overt resistance to change, particularly in leaders who just don't participate, don't activate, don't engage, but where we also see resistance to change is more passively. And that can be through not engaging in initiatives deeply, not signing off on business cases to invest in the technologies or to poke holes continuously into the business case for the introduction of the AI related technologies. And while that continues to be the role of those in decision making um, positions, it can be a tool or a mechanism to resist change um, passively versus actively.
yeah, I totally agree with you. And, coming from the same fraternity, I think we have seen that leader insecurity leads to lack of trust within the organization, within teams. And, there is already the fear of AI replacing jobs. And if leaders are not modeling the right behaviors, which is building trust, I totally agree with you. That's like a double whammy for, the fear within the organization. So Stephanie, I mean, if I mean we've seen in many organizations, and we read a lot through reports coming in consulting firms and all of that, that AI adoption is collapsing in large organizations after launch, right? So from a people perspective, what do you think are the real root causes that you see most in organizations that you've been working in? Whether is it like the incentives are not aligned, or whether the workflows are not changing fast enough as the technology is changing, or whether leaders, like we spoke about just now, are not modeling the right kind of behaviors?
Yeah, I think it's all, but I also one of the biggest I think barriers to an effective adoption or introduction of technology is not is the workflows themselves and not redesigning workflows. I think that in the case of AI, this is not just a technology implementation. It's an organizational design and leadership opportunity to change the nature of work within an organization. And I think that one of the things that we tend to do is introduce technology, and in this case, AI related technology, as an and. We're going to introduce this new technology on top of the work that we already do, the way that we already do it,
Yeah.
and it becomes and we're going to check our work, or we're going to test our work, or we're going to test others, or we're going to iterate and improve upon what people have sent us through the technology versus really looking at how the technology and how AI will remove steps within our work, remove needs for approval hierarchies, not take the place of delegations of authority and of governance, but really asking ourselves, can we reorganize the way work is done through the roles, through the team structures, through the organizational design construct, through the delegations and the governance to say, how can we do our work better, faster, and smarter that does not compromise on the quality of decision making, but it
Mhm.
improves the pace and the speed of decision making and allows us to look at more data more deeply, more broadly to make sure that we're making better and more well-informed decisions, or we're looking at problems from a different perspective and being able to glean more exponential innovation than incremental outcomes. And so I think that hand in hand with every time we're introducing a new piece of technology or a new capability that is enabled by AI, we need to ask ourselves, what can we take away? And I
Yeah.
think that perhaps in the past with technology introductions, we can look at the the processes and the paperwork and the steps and the screens and the bureaucracy and put one thing in new and take one thing out. Now with AI, we might be able to put one thing in new and take five things out.
Yeah.
And that is, again, not to cut corners or to miss the need for critical thinking and for empathy and compassion and to think about the human implications of what we're doing, but take out the work that is repetitive and mundane and simply can be done and completed by technology and proofread or enhanced or improved by the critical thinking and the capabilities of our people.
Yeah, I love the fact that you said that, it's not and, right? You already have a full operating model in any and every organization. And then when you say we are also on top of that, we are doing an AI rollout, then it's there is a lot of duplication, right? And so it's like designing a new operating system. And
Mhm.
and so moving to your area of expertise, Stephanie, if an organization has to design a people enablement operating system for AI, right? What do you
Mhm.
think are some of the non-negotiables in terms of rituals and mechanisms, which will make that adoption inevitable?
Yeah, no, I think it's a great question. And I think the reality is that the pace of change and the introduction and enhancement of AI technology is moving at a far faster rate than we will really realistically be able to reskill, upskill, and change an organization and the organizational construct and behaviors and skills. But we've got to try, and we've got to work at speed, and we have to be willing to take some risks and experiment and to reinforce the expectations and the behaviors of that experimentation and learning to adapt and adopt quickly. So that means that we need to think about our rituals, which are the symbols and the systems and the behaviors that that underpin our organizational culture. And
Mhm.
our organizational culture is formed by how we hire people, how we onboard people, how we manage performance, how we manage talent, how we manage rewards, how we offboard. And AI will need to be introduced and integrated into every step of our employee experience, of our employee life cycle, all the way from when we start identifying candidates through the hiring process, all the way through to the end of cycle with an organization for whatever the reason may be. And that demonstration reflection of embracing the technology also becomes a reflection of the organization itself. And part of the one of the most critical roles within an organization to foster and enable our culture are our people managers. So, do our
Yeah.
people managers have the skills and abilities? Are they incentivized and rewarded, or incentivized and not rewarded based on the behaviors that they're exhibiting and the skills that they are demonstrating and committing to as a manager? Are they having conversations regularly with their team members about what is expected of them, both in terms of what they're expected to do and how they're expected to do it? Do they bake it into the interviewing process when they're bringing new people on board? Do they think about how they allocate rewards throughout the year in whatever form or fashion that organization delivers reward outcomes, and incorporate how people are embracing the technology and changing the way that they work, and therefore the work of their team and their organization? And so it starts from job descriptions to, again, the performance management systems, but there's a massive dependency on people management capabilities. So then we want to see that reinforced in their incentives, again, in those job descriptions, how we hire. Do we interview for people management skills? Are we
Yeah.
investing as an organization in the development of our frontline managers, our middle managers, and our experienced leaders who also have to demonstrate management capability?
Yeah, I mean, totally. And do you think that the role playbooks are changing, Stephanie, because roles are definitely evolving. Like you spoke about, the manager's role is evolving now, right? It's different than what it was before AI. And I mean, in addition to what they do as a manager in managing performance and incentives and rewards that you spoke about, I'm sure that they are also looking at managers as coaches, right? To manage anxiety
Mm,
within their teams and to make sure that the transition is smooth and people feel supported, right? So, do you think that the role playbooks are changing as well?
absolutely. And I think you nailed it. And if I think about kind of the first question that we talked about, the introduction of AI and the fear that it's creating in people's sense of identity and sense of agency, can actually be ideally mitigated when we talk about the power and the benefits of AI being able to facilitate and enable that more repetitive work that we do every day, no matter what role we're in, from a frontline like to middle management to executive management. We all have that level of work and the type of work to varying degrees. And the more that that type of work can be automated, the more time gets freed up to do the coaching,
Yeah.
to be the leader, to shift the proportion of time that we spend on leading versus doing,
Mm-hmm.
to where I think that in the world that we operate in today, all of our leaders have some percentage of their time spent on doing. If we
Yeah.
can reduce that percentage of time on doing and increasing to coaching and mentoring and building capability and to leading and inspiring, we will see a result that is higher levels of performance for the organization overall, individual for teams, for individuals, for share price, etc.
Yeah. And that would be like the real use of AI, right? I mean, if we want to see a transformation which benefits the organization from a people development perspective, then freeing up some time, AI is the real value of AI is, right? To free up people's time. I mean, managers, I mean, if you would see that the adoption of AI in an organization has been effective and for the benefit and good of the organization, then managers should feel that they have more time on their hands for developing their teams, right? And I also, you spoke about culture, right? And I think that, culture is the heart and the soul of any organization, right? So, and if you have the right culture, which is defined by the right leadership behavior, then I think any transformation or any rollout or any new implementation is that much easier. So, in your experience, Stephanie, I mean, how do you, I want to say, quantify AI ROI without creating like
Mm.
a surveillance culture? So,
Yeah,
what's the trust safe measurement, I want to say, that tracks outcomes, but without tracking people? I know there's a very fine
yeah.
balance in the two, but I would love to hear your perspective.
Yeah, I mean, it's a tricky one. I think that because both are important, right? So
Yeah.
if we start with surveillance in mind, so the technology has the ability to watch every keystroke, measure every keystroke, time spent, pages viewed. I mean, the technology can go as deep as we want it to, and as an organization, we have the ability through our systems and software to track and measure what people are actually doing on a day-to-day basis. But if people feel that that's happening, or they know it's happening, that is likely to erode trust. And in an environment where people are already feeling fear,
Yeah.
and then you erode trust, the delta is becoming quite wide in terms of, are we really going to get the best out of their people? If they're if they're fearful and they're not trusting, are they focusing
Mhm.
on what it is we're asking them to do from a performance perspective, both in terms of what we're expecting them to do and how we're expecting them to do? But if we demonstrate a commitment, and through how we engage with our employees, that there is a level of trust, and we provide guardrails, and we provide mechanisms like delegations of authority and codes of conduct, and policies and programs that are there to reinforce what we expect of our employees, and we hold them accountable for doing it
Mhm.
well and reward and recognize accordingly, or we have mechanisms in place to understand when those guardrails are being adhered to, or those that governance is not in place or being bypassed, and there's the right conversations and the right actions as a result of that, and people within the organization see the consistency and the transparency of how people are treated. It creates an environment where people aren't fearful, they feel more confident, and therefore more willing and committed and able to do what it is the organization is asking them to do, asking us to do as those employees.
Yeah, and you brought about conversations, and I completely agree that consistency in conversations at every level builds a lot of trust in the organization, right? And sometimes we feel that conversations, only need to be at the time of reviews or at the time of, whether it's a
Mm,
review or an appreciation conversation or a development conversation. And those are the points where you need to have a conversation. But in addition to that, I think that if there are constant conversations happening between leaders and their teams, and you have a step approach, which is like, there is a cascade of communication from, the top of the organization all the way to the last man in, then one, everybody's on the same page, and there is no speculation, right, within the organization, and which also builds fears, because then there is, grapevine, and then there is a lot of, chit chat, which is unnecessary, which can create anxiety and fear. And like I said, this happens in a normal, has been happening all along. Like I
mm,
said, I mean, both of us coming from this fraternity have seen this so much, and so much of the CHRO's time goes in managing, unnecessary conversations and grapevine. But with AI now coming in, I think those have magnified. So
hmm
if you had to, you work closely with CEOs as a partner. If a CEO had to give, let's say, I don't want to say 90 seconds, but let's say gives has to address the workforce. What message really builds trust and momentum while making sure that, there is the AI adoption is expected from the organization, so everybody
mm.
has a real role. But at the same time, from a people perspective, they feel supported as well. So, what should be the some key ingredients of that address, if you may?
Yeah, it's a tricky one. But and before I answer that specific question, I would reinforce what you said at the beginning of the question, which is those regular, frequent conversations that need to happen throughout the day, throughout the week, throughout the year between leadership and employees to reinforce the expectations um, that we have. And that comes back to the discussion we were having on people managers. And I think that we have had over time an increasing dependence on our people managers. We don't see a direct correlation between the investment in developing the skills and capabilities of people managers at the pace with which their capabilities are needed to be stronger and better.
Yeah,
And that's where I really think with the introduction of AI, the rapid introduction and adoption of AI, we really need to hone in on what I would say is that lost middle. The middle managers, we tend to see more support and investment in the development of our executive population, and then in the skills of our frontline or individual contributor workforce. But I think that there is a risk that the people managers in the middle of the organization get a bit lost. They don't get necessarily the differentiated investment. They may not get the HR um, support from the organization, and they're winging it a lot of the time.
yeah,
Um, and that's where we really need as organizations to think about that stakeholder group, that audience, that population as core and critical to driving the adoption, driving the capabilities, building the skills, leading change, creating sense of purpose and value for the people in the organization, increasing the trust, reducing the fear. That's where we're going to get the scale, and we're going to get the sustainable and scalable change that's required. And so I think that's an important point from our discussion. And I think that also, when I think about a CEO, kind of 90-second pitch or really any executive, I think it's important to be simple, to be direct, to use your authentic voice, whomever you may be, and put some context for the industry or the organization that you're coming from. But some of the messages are around, AI is going to change how we work, and just like it's changing in every industry. Our goal isn't just to adopt the technology, it's to build the capability of our people. And we're going to invest in helping everyone on this journey to learn how to use these tools. And we're going to expect experimentation, and we're going to ask questions, and we're going to experiment ourselves and role model as leaders and expect you to ask questions of us. And we'll give support along the way, and we will be transparent, and we will be open, and we will reinforce what is expected, reinforce what we're learning, and encourage the adoption and the embracing of these new technologies, because we believe that AI isn't about replacing our people, it's about enhancing the value of our people.
Yeah, absolutely. And two things. You spoke about the middle management, Stephanie, and I think the middle management is like the engine of any organization, right? That's the layer which is most often neglected, but that's the layer which also churns out the maximum, right? Picks up the most load, and is expected to deliver most, right? So completely agree with you that those are the ones which need to feel supported both by HR and by the leadership team as well, and not be just left to manage their own teams without building the middle management capability. Yeah, I mean, and what you said about CEOs keeping it simple. I always feel the simpler the message, the better it resonates, right? And AI was, I mean, lots of companies are, almost every company is now experimenting with AI. But I also feel that there's been a shift now from experimentation to expectation. And that is
Mm,
that is putting a little bit of pressure on the organization. And that also is causing the fear that we started our conversation with, because the expectation phase has now started. Do you agree with that?
absolutely, absolutely. And I think at the end of the day, in addition to into keeping it simple and being direct and being authentic, in order to reduce that fear and increase the trust, we just need to do what we say we're going to do
Yeah.
and hold ourselves accountable to that. And it can be the big things, but it's also very much the little things. And so that transparency, that consistency, that role modeling, and just that simple commitment of doing what we say we're going to do will really help with the reduction of the fear, the increase of the trust, the adoption and embedding of the technology, and ultimately the performance outcomes that the organization is expecting to achieve.
Yep. So that right there is what human-centered transformation truly looks like. Not AI versus people, not speed versus empathy, but both in sync. Stephanie, what you've shared today is such a powerful reminder that organizations that will win in the AI era are the ones that are not just best with technology, but they are the ones who have the most prepared, most enabled, and most trusted people. So thank you for your honesty and your deeply grounded perspective. It's been an absolute privilege having you on Leaders Unplugged. And I look forward to staying in touch and continuing the conversation with you.
Thank you so much, Ujjwal. I really appreciate it. And thank you for the opportunity with L&D Unboxed.
And to our listeners, if there's one thing I hope that you take away from this conversation, it is that your people fear is not a barrier to transformation. It's a signal. So listen to it, lead with it, and use it to build something better. So AI is not waiting, we all know that, but neither are your people. The question was never whether to transform, it's the how. So if this conversation has resonated, please share it with leaders in your network and subscribe to Leaders Unplugged. See you the next time.